So, right before we start, wanted to let everybody out there know that a portion of this podcast, unfortunately, went a little bit wonky, and about 4 minutes were deleted. So, toward the end of the podcast, you may hear me come back on again and say, "Hey guys, it's Amanda. Here I am again." And 4 minutes is missing. We cut to something else, and we hope you enjoy this really incredible recording with Chris Allen. Enjoy. Hello, guys. Welcome to Semi-Woo. Woo-woo. My name's Amanda.
And I'm Heather.
And today we have another exciting interview with Mr. Chris Allen. You may know him from the Seattle Files, which, what I've heard, is one of Seattle's best podcasts. And from listening, it's pretty damn
And we
cool.
were like Googling like
Who are
Seattle's
the
top
coolest
bestest
people?
podcast for real. We typed bestest in Google and you popped up. So that was
That's
cool.
pretty awesome. So we're going to hand it over to Chris, let him introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Chris. Thanks so much for having me on this.
Yeah,
This is really
course.
fun. So I host the Seattle Files podcast, which I'm a local historian and a comedian. And so I research stories about local history, and I teach those stories to comedians, and then we riff on it, and it's a lot of fun. And each episode is a different topic. We've been on a break for a while now, but there's new episodes coming out starting July 18th or July 19th. They'll come out every Tuesday from here on out. Mm-hmm.
Do you pick the stories? I mean, there's probably no dearth of crazy stories from this land.
I do pick the stories, yeah. I was worried. There's 41 episodes out right now,
Wow.
and I was worried at the beginning that I was going to start running out of stories,
Yeah.
and that I don't think that'll ever happen.
Really?
It just
'Cause there's
got
just-
bigger and bigger and
There's
bigger.
so much. As researching one thing, I'll come across something else that's just I'm going to write that down for later and then
Yeah.
do a whole episode on that, and it just really unfolds. People send me stories, but everything just kind of unfolds,
Oh.
and it's a bottomless well, I think, of crazy and weird. And just when I thought I've covered all the weird stuff, something else.
Is that because Seattle people are weird? Like
Seattle is
and,
kind
like,
of a weird
genetic
city, right?
DNA.
I don't know if it's that Seattle is weird. I kind of want to think so.
Mhm.
But it's also just the stuff that you don't hear about and the stuff that kind of gets buried and lost to
Right.
time
Right.
and stuff from different time periods that might have seemed perfectly normal at the time, but now it's just bizarre. A story that I researched recently,
Yes.
just recorded. I'm not exactly sure when it's going to be out, but it took place in Spokane during the Great Depression. The police department was incredibly corrupt, notoriously corrupt,
Wow.
unsurprising. But there was a massive food shortage going on because of the Dust Bowls, and these corrupt cops would go around and they would rob creameries, steal butter, and sell it on the black market.
Why creameries?
Because there was such a high demand for butter. Because
Okay.
butter
Oh
was
my
so expensive because
gosh.
the farmers couldn't feed their cows.
Oh, because it was the Dust Bowl.
Yeah.
Dang.
Fuck those guys.
And cream and
You know,
butter.
I've never said this with more emphasis, but fuck the police.
Yeah.
From that time.
Yeah,
in
fuck
Spokane.
1930s
butter.
Spokane
Yeah,
Police
that's what I mean
Butter was
when
Department.
a
I
hot
say that.
drug, and people are just in alleys writhing with butter all over their face.
That's one
Wow.
of the cops got caught in a car with a bunch of empty butter wrappers.
Oh.
He's like, "What, me, officer? What?
Yeah.
Oh, those aren't mine."
Like the people that get caught huffing paint, and there's paint
know.
all over their face. I imagine that, but with butter.
Did they call them?
Just butter.
Did they call them smoothie fingers instead
Oh,
of
yeah.
sticky fingers? Oh, that was a groaner.
old
I can
greasy
remember that.
hands
That was a groaner.
McGill.
Greasy hands McGill caught again with 2 sticks of
You're
illegal
being
butter.
caught with a bunch of empty. I mean, that's got to be your
And
most
I like
shameful
that there
day.
was there's no bread found, there's no crackers found. He was going straight for the good
just
goods,
going
and he
straight
was
for
mainlining it.
Yeah. Have you guys ever met people who eat butter? I know
someone
people
that
like
eats
just
mayonnaise,
they just bite
I've
it.
met people that eat mayonnaise as a workout kind of
but like from the spoon.
supplement. Yeah.
What
Oh my God,
workout
oh my
is
God, oh my
that?
God.
It's I guess it's got the things your body needs to
I
recover
have a
from a
feeling
workout.
that's like
Ah.
CrossFit. If you stay long enough,
It
they
was
get
at CrossFit.
They,
It
yeah,
was
see,
at a
they
CrossFit
start,
gym.
They start. Oh yeah, we just lift weights, and then they're mayo eaters.
Oh man.
Ugh.
Are you a historian by like degree or by
No.
love?
No, I'm just a guy. I really like history. A while ago, I'm a comedian and an actor, and a while ago I was looking for a day job, and I started working at the Underground Tour.
Yeah.
that.
I
That's
read
so
about
cool.
And
it.
so I
That's
started doing the
awesome.
Underground Tour, and I learned their stories, and I started researching, and I learned Big Dirt here. It's about 70% made up. But as I dug more and more, I found all these other really interesting stories, and I was like, oh, this is great. And so I decided on doing a podcast about it, and then just continued researching and learning more and more and more after that.
Were you a comedian first or historian?
I was a comedian
history lover?
first.
Okay.
I've always kind of liked history, but
Yeah.
I did not do anything with it professionally, or didn't really. I read history books every once in a while, but never really dove headfirst into it until I started doing the podcast and started working. And now I have my own company where I do walking tours of Seattle. So there's
oh my
a
gosh, we're gonna have to
that,
go
yeah.
on that.
yeah, there's a company, Seattle Free Walking Tours, who they
I've
do
heard of
free pay what you
this.
feel. Yeah, if you ever see people walking around downtown with the
Yeah,
flags, that's them.
totally.
And so all their tours were selling out, and so they contacted me and said, "Can you write some new tours for us?"
Yeah.
And I said, "Sure." And I
Dude.
went and I wrote a regular history tour and a crime tour. And so now I do that kind of under their umbrella.
Yeah.
So if you go to seattlefreewalkingtours.com and go to the history tour, true crime tour,
Is
then
this the one that like starts
I
in
lead those.
Pioneer Square?
One of them starts in Pioneer Square.
Okay.
One of them starts on the waterfront by
Yeah,
Ivers.
Okay.
This is
I
so
want to go to the
awesome.
true crime. I'm a big true
I
crime
too
fan.
was
come
a
check it out.
tour guide for San
Oh,
Diego
yeah.
City
Yes, she
sightseeing, so I know
was.
the industry. It's incredible. And what you don't, I thought it was just a fun job where I could be on the mic. I was a comedian too, anything to like make people laugh and be on the mic. It sounded,
Yeah.
very
Someone hands you a microphone,
glamorous.
you just say yes.
I'm like, I don't know what it would, give me a script. Don't give me a script. But when I wanted my tours to kind of be more juicy, I started to learn, and I learned some really cool stuff.
Mhm.
yeah.
It was,
you
it
knew
was
a lot
awesome.
more than I would have expected when I went on your tour. I was very impressed. I was.
It was cool. Yeah, because when you live in a city, you're right. A lot of the you know about the upfront things, but the cool stuff gets swept under the rug, or like you said, stuff that maybe they at the time wasn't. It was normal.
Yeah,
It
Yeah.
wouldn't have been
yeah.
considered cool.
Right.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us have the idea of Seattle being such a modern city that it just kind of came into existence in the late 1970s
Right.
and don't really know anything
So
about
it's not
it.
founded it.
Or
It's
the
like
World's Fair in
fishermen
62.
and technology.
Yeah.
Right? One or the other.
Yeah.
yeah.
People from I'm from California. Her and I met in California. Heather's lived in a bunch of different places, but people always ask about the Northwest with this like kind of glowy. It's like very mysterious to
Right.
people who have either only visited or haven't lived here. They go like, "What's Seattle like?" And I'm like, "What is it? What is it like?" Like there is this mystery around the Pacific Northwest, in particular, more than other places. I think that is. I always, when I first moved here, wanted to know more about it because it just seems like its own, it's like similar to Portland, like keep Portland weird, and Seattle has this, kind of this like interesting history that you can almost feel
Right.
here, and maybe you don't know all of the details, and it does seem very modern. And you're like, okay, it's modern, but you can tell it's ancient too.
It's kind of it's the frontier, and I think a lot of the rest of the country thinks about that, thinks of it like that. Now it's a tech hub and everything, but it's still kind of feels out there. And I moved to
Yeah.
New York, and I went to college in New York.
Okay.
And when I was out there, I didn't realize how remote Seattle was, not only from the East Coast and major population areas, but just even from other cities. Because we have Portland 3 hours away, and then
Right.
other than Vancouver, 3 hours to the north. And other than that, it's
That's
an
it.
unspeakably long distance compared to other, especially
true.
the East Coast, where you can
Right.
drive through 3 states in 5 hours.
Yeah.
And hit like major cities.
Major
Like
population
California,
densities.
it's
And
same thing.
Same
we
thing, right.
are out there on the front. I mean, if you head east from here, how long until you hit a major city?
What
Like
is
a
it?
real
Are
major
we glazing
city.
over Spokane? I mean, is
Well,
that
Spokane
a major
is
city?
south, right? It's like southeast.
Well, I guess so.
Southeast, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
like not till
What, like
Nampa.
Iowa?
I don't know.
Yeah.
What is it? I mean, is it? Yeah.
Or Chicago.
Chicago?
I mean,
Chicago,
It
next
must
big
be
city
the
that I
next
think
big
about.
city.
Yeah.
maybe. Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you're just going east.
And then the other way, it's like Tokyo,
But it does.
I mean, Montana's entire population is 1 million. Did you know that?
which is like,
Like
the
the
hill.
state.
the state is the population is
1
a million.
people right around hovering there.
Wow.
That's just amazing if you think about how big that
in
is.
that land.
That's why I get a big ranch. That's what I plan on doing when
So
I'm about
how did
75.
you? Where did the marriage of comedy and the love for history come into play?
I
Did that happen?
when I started working at the Underground and I started
Okay.
researching and I started reading all these books about it, and that's when I kind of realized, oh, this is all really interesting stuff, and I'd really like to do something with this in some capacity. And I was listening to The Dollop. Do you know The Dollop at
No,
all?
I
Dollop
don't.
is a comedy history podcast, true history stuff, and I was really liking it. I was like, oh, I'd
Yeah.
love to do something like this.
Yeah.
And that's where I kind of got the idea for it. And so I researched a couple stories, and I got together with some friends, and I had a microphone because I do voiceover stuff, and so we
I
recorded a
can't
couple.
see that. I can't see you doing voice.
Yeah, your voice is very weird.
It's a
Oh,
little
thank
weak.
yeah.
Yeah,
No,
I
it's
don't like
it's
it.
it's yeah. Mm.
We were just saying we love your radio voice. That was earlier.
You guys missed that. You must have just not been in on it. Sorry.
Just not yeah.
So a question I have for you
Mm-hmm.
is, when you and this is from kind of like a podcaster question. So when you were starting out, and I think that, podcasting is this great, excuse me, somewhat simple to do, somewhat like easy. Like you don't really have to get a ton of equipment.
Yeah.
You don't really have to have, you can start kind of big, but you can also start small. And surprisingly, even our cell phones have decent mics, or you can get like a $10, lav mic on Amazon.
Yeah.
So when you started podcasting, did you have kind of like a plan for what it was going to be, or did it evolve over time, like your format and what you wanted to do? How did that come about with your actual podcast?
It definitely evolved. I took a long time in planning, and I think just because of the nature of it, there's so much time for research that it necessitated doing a lot of kind of long-term planning. But the original idea for the podcast was I wanted to do one episode on each neighborhood in Seattle and have a comedian from that neighborhood as the guest on. And as I started doing research, I realized, that would be messy because the episode on Greenwood would be 10 minutes long, and the episode on Pioneer Square would be 4 hours.
Right.
So it didn't really, and there's everything interconnected. And I was like, okay, I'll just do stories, and then trying to match up the stories with the people, trying to figure out what the best name was. I had a long list of really clever, dumb names.
Throw out a few.
I don't even remember what they were. Yeah, I think one of them was like Back of the Library or something. I was like, why? Oh god,
that sounds a little
cringeworthy
It's like a
now.
little sexy too.
Yeah, I know. What's going
Depending
on in the
on
back of the
what you
library?
do in the back of the library.
But just trying to, and then, one of the other ideas was to try to turn it into a TV show, to try to do long-term planning, and I took a lot of steps in that direction, and it kind of fizzled out. But yeah, it did change and evolve. But once I actually decided on the format for the show, it hasn't really changed much since then.
That's awesome.
Do you ever think about getting your comedians drunk and having them tell us?
Oh, I was going to say on a scale from 1 to infuriated when Drunk History came out.
Right, it's going to happen. It was going to happen.
Drunk History, if you like Drunk History, you'll like the show. The best way I've heard it described is it's like Drunk History, but sober.
Okay.
Right.
And I'm like, yeah, so I target...
I think you even said that. You're like, it's like kind of like Drunk History, but sober.
Yeah.
Yeah,
with much more detail in the stories, too. That's another thing.
Drunk, no, I don't drink, and so I find it annoying when people are really drunk, and I'm trying to talk to them. Like, okay, bring it back, bring it back. Bring it back. So, but it's very similar to like a Drunk History kind of thing, where it's real factual events but told in a kind of lighthearted way.
I love it.
I know, and the joking. Gotta have that little laughter here and there. At least that's what we do. Try to.
Which is also problematic though, because a lot of history is not something you really laugh at, and it's very serious. And how do you tell some of these stories? I still haven't done one on Japanese internment, which I really want to because it's such a huge topic.
Right.
But I don't know how to handle that. And some of the topics that are a little bit more delicate, I make sure I have someone on that I know pretty well, that I know will be able to, because I don't tell people what we're going to be talking about going into it.
Right.
They come in, they're learning the story as the audience is.
Oh, that's cool.
So there was one I did on Seattle's quote unquote first trans man.
Yeah.
His name was Harry Allen, who was born Noel Pickerel and lived this very rough life, being born in the 1880s.
Wow.
As a transgender man working on 2 women fell in love with him and then committed suicide when they found out his secret.
Oh.
He lived this very rough life, but it's such a delicate topic to talk about.
Right.
Yeah.
So I made sure to have somebody that I knew very well and trusted on.
Yeah.
Right. But, I like bringing, and not to say like to make Japanese internment camp something we can all, feel lighthearted about, but bringing this history to the forefront without this, like a guilt or like this weighing down feeling that sometimes when we read about history and open ourselves up to history, you can feel that makes us maybe sometimes avoid it. I was watching this documentary on the national parks. I've been talking about
it's her favorite. She loves
dang
it.
Is it
national
the
parks.
Ken Burns documentary in the
love
national
it.
parks?
Did you
It's
see
so
it?
great.
And the Seattle part was really awesome because, like you said, I've lived here for a little over 10 years on and off, and I still think it started when I still think Nirvana founded it. And so it was very cool to see this footage of Pioneer Square and downtown, and they really covered the Japanese internment camps a lot. And what I got from that section of it, because it was really big here, we had a large Japanese population, a lot of hope coming from those camps, a lot of art that came out of it. These people, their love for nature and their connection to this land as Americans. So there is some there. They did find a way to spin this to where at the end I was like, cool. Or not cool about the camps, but what a cool attitude to come out of that.
To be able to see that side, of a horrible story.
A horrible story that honestly, I mean, we went to a lot of Christian schools as kids, but that wasn't in our history books.
No,
and I can say that
absolutely
right
not.
now.
Oh, yeah.
No, not at all.
Yeah, I
Not at
remember
all.
reading a lot about history, and it was all from the perspective of white people and white settlers
Yep.
and white Europeans that came out here. And when I was writing this history tour, the very beginning is talking about the natives and the first natives getting here, and then trying to tell the story of westward expansion from the perspective of the native populations that were in there. But it was such a hard, because most of the people that are on the tour are on vacation or they're there to do. And how do I talk about what really essentially comes to genocide in a
Right.
way that is engaging and interesting, where you're actually able to talk about what happened in an honest way and not glaze over it,
Right.
because that's what a lot of people do, and a lot
I
of books
know.
do, and a lot
Yeah.
of organizations that deal with it do, is they just don't address it. So how do you address it without
Being like a Debbie Downer. Of the
yeah,
history
how do
world.
you address it in a way that doesn't terrify and horrify?
So they can eat
People-
their Pike Place chowder later.
Yeah,
you know?
how do you approach it in a way that's honest but not hyperbolic and emotional? And it's a
Right,
very
right,
and
that's
is that
tough.
even a right thing to do? It's another
Right.
question.
I mean, we do. If it's it's one of those things where a lot of, and this is like my woo woo side, but kind of over the years that I've been discovering taking empirical data as the only way to get to know anything, and learning that there is something about personal experience that can be your version or your perspective of the truth, right? So in a way, there isn't a way to say like, what is the truth of history? It's like, what perspective is it being told from? Yeah, what people is it being told
Yeah,
from?
very
you know,
true.
so
Mhm.
I think it's important that we would, of course, see the perspective of the native people. And it's very recently, in my life, from being in school in Southern California and being at a Christian college where it was 100% white perspective, 100%, and things completely glossed over. And so when you, especially as like a young adult, when you start to figure these things out and you start to read, and and you have like guns, germs, and steel and all, and you're just angry. You're like, what?
Yeah.
This, and you start to see perspective, and it's like, why did we come here and then say we discovered it, but then we just put people in reservations? Like, it just doesn't make sense.
Right. I think in sharing those stories, though, a lot of times I come out with this side of like, man, things have gotten better. Like,
Yeah.
it's uplifting.
Absolutely.
We're not putting people in internment. I mean, we're
Well,
doing it in a different way through
prisons.
I get
Prisons
it. I
now.
get it. But it's we're wise to it. We're hip to it. It's not going to happen in that way.
That's something I
again.
talk about a lot. People ask what my favorite era of history is, and I always say the present, because the present has a lot
Yeah,
of things to work on, but
absolutely.
compared to the past, we have made a lot of progress.
Honey,
And that's not
yes.
done, but oh my God, things are so much better than they have been. And that's not to say like people should be grateful for the way things are right now.
Right.
People shouldn't complain anymore. It's more of it works.
It works.
Fighting works.
Mhm,
Yeah.
it does.
Pressing works. Looking
Changing
for
your
change
mind
and
works.
forcing change works.
It
Demanding
does.
to be heard works. And that's
Yes.
something that I find
dissemination
very
of information, like massive. It has to
yeah.
happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is something we talk about a lot, is that statistically, on every front, the world is at the best. It's the best possible world it has ever been, right? Like right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As far as freedom, world wars, disease, everything. Like, it is right now the best time that you could live. But because of our access to information, and a lot of times like negative information, and our access to seeing like all of the bad things that are happening, you ask the average person, they're like, oh, this is the worst time.
Right.
This is the most murders. This is the most terrorists. This is
Yeah.
the most. And that's such an interesting shift that I don't want to say ignorance is bliss. Like, you plug your ears and like, oh, if I just don't listen to anything, then it will be a perfectly good world. But there has to be some sort of a balance where we're looking at all the progress that we have made, and like
Well, I think
the
it's
things
human
that we have
consciousness,
done.
like waking up to the fact that this stuff has happened, reading these history lessons that we hadn't really been taught about before, and you're
Mhm.
like just learning that there's been genocides over there, and these people aren't taken care of, and these people were done wrong, and we're seeing things over a long period of time, and the results of certain things. So it can seem like everything's kind of crumbling when
Right.
you look at a history book and you're like, nah, there's not really an era that I would do better in than now.
Yeah.
As a black woman, especially,
Right.
like this is the one. This is a good one.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
one's working for all of us. The best.
Doing its
Mhm.
best.
Yeah.
Still got a long ways to go, but it's doing its best for sure. So a question I have for you that I just thought of a few minutes ago was, as a comedian and as a Seattleite, do you find, and this is just from my moving away about 3 years, I've been gone out of Seattle for about 3 years and coming back and just seeing the changes, the developments, the kind of the tech boom, the everything that's going on with with transgender and Black Lives Matter and all of these, like, the big issues, right? Like, from living in different cities, I can say from my own perspective, Seattle is definitely the most in your face, progressive, like, accept, everywhere. It's just it's everywhere all the time. So we were wondering, we're like, man, what can comedians even talk about anymore?
Yeah,
is there any sense that because these, obviously very rightly so, these issues that are being talked about here in a very big way, that there's almost like a cultural sensitivity that things seem to be almost off limits or censored in a way?
I don't necessarily think that things are off limits and censored. I think that it's a tricky thing. I remember we were talking a little bit before this about comedians and rape jokes before we started recording. And I remember I don't really do stand-up anymore, but years and years ago, when I first started doing stand-up, every open mic I went to, all I heard was rape jokes all the time. Wow. It was just a constant stream of it.
That's not even hyperbole.
It's not.
No,
it's
not.
I would say every other comic, half of their bits, because it's all straight white men. Not to say that it's all that they talk about, but it's people who are frustrated and people who don't. Oh God, a friend of mine described it perfectly. She went to an open mic night, and I was talking with her the next day, and she said it was all young men who are frustrated that women have sexual power over them.
Oh,
and I was like, you hit the nail. That is a textbook worthy definition. And I think that anything can be talked about, and people talk about like punching up and punching down, and that's a big thing people talk about. If you're going to throw punches with your comedy, punch up at authority, don't punch down at victims. And that's I can appreciate that perspective. I think anything can be addressed as long as it's addressed in an insightful enough way, or if it's funny enough. And I think that if you're just going out there and you're saying these shocking things and you think that in and of itself is funny, that doesn't work. Or if it's kind of funny, but it's not funny enough to justify, or insightful or smart enough to justify the offense that you're giving, then it's not going to work and it's not appropriate. And there's certain rooms now in Seattle for stand-up, and the Comedy Womb was the big thing. It's called the Comedy Nest now, where it's and I did it a couple of times, and I wasn't super into that scene, super like familiar with it. I mean, but people could talk about whatever they wanted, but you're not going to hear people go up and talking about rape and sexual assault and things like that. And it was very more liberating than it was censoring.
Right.
It was a very
Elevate
wonderful,
comedy a
like,
little bit.
yeah. And I definitely, like, I don't think that we shouldn't be allowed to talk, we shouldn't mask talking about potentially offensive things, but I don't think it's that out there to say that the way people feel is important.
Yeah.
And that's what it comes down to, is saying, hey, the way people feel is important, so let's take that into consideration when we're doing things.
Right.
And I do a lot of sketch, and I'm in a group called Death and Taxes with my partner, Graham Downing, and we did a show a while ago where we did a sketch about 9/11. And it was a late night cable access talk show about spooky things and the macabre and horror movies and things like that. But we did the show that they did the day after 9/11. Where they were trying to like figure out how do we talk about things and how do we not. And it was much more about how people deal with grief and how people address after there's been a tragedy and how people try to move on from things like that than it was 9/11. And I'm sure some people were offended by that. And I but more than not, I think people were. And I certainly can't speak if I'm going to go out there and talk about things like being black or being gay or being trans or anything like that, because I don't have that experience. And not necessarily to say that people that don't have those direct experiences shouldn't be able to talk about that. But again, it needs to be funny or insightful or intelligent in the approach to it enough to be able to deal with it effectively, as opposed to black people, gay people, whatever.
Shock.
Yeah, there's this level of comedy, and you, unfortunately, when you're starting out, you're in it for a long time. That's like, I said that. I call it like the I said that comics. Like,
if you're
I
saying
just said
fuck
those
you
words
to the crowd, you're doing it wrong.
I said it, guys. Guys, I said it. And you're like, but you didn't say anything about it, or you didn't say anything new about it, or you didn't in any way, educate or elevate this topic, so that it doesn't matter.
In a long time, and that you're sad about it, so now we feel bad for you. It's like a whole
just because you said it doesn't mean you had something to say about it.
Right.
It's just that you said it.
We've bumped up against this a lot because a lot of our comedy is I guess my dad would say avant-garde if he wanted to impress his friends, but it's weird. And we touch on issues with abortion and
we did this for example we did a video that
hair.
was we did a video that was a teasing on
throw it or not.
What was the first one? Movember, where the guys do the mustaches, and then there's Decembeard, where it was for another cause. And so we did grow out your pussy bush march.
Bushuary.
But the joke was that it was like a terrible name, like it didn't have a like Decembeard is so creative, and Movember, and ours was grow out your pussy bush march. So we did this little video that was kind of like a rallying call, and we played these two, like, somewhat, like probably like lesbian couple, and it was just silly, and it was kombucha flavored dental dams, and it was really just, but in a way,
what a horrible flavor for that.
Does it fizz?
I need probiotics
you
with
try
my
it
dental
just to see if it fizzed.
That was one of the prizes in the gift bag that we're giving away at our festival. So, all right, guys, we're back, as you can tell, with Mr. Chris Allen, who has if you guys haven't seen the artwork on his website, please go take a look. It's so cool. It's everything about Seattle, and it's you and your cartoon. It's just great. It's larger than life. I love it.
Yeah.
I really adore it.
He was telling us about the Seattle Files, his podcast online, but we promised to take it woo-woo.
Oh,
and
yeah.
ask you about your Vipassana experience.
Yeah.
So tell us a
And
little
right
bit
before
about
that, I want to know too, on a level from like super crazy only science to totally spiritual woo woo. Where would you put yourself, just kind of in your daily life?
Oh, geez. I don't know if those are necessarily mutually exclusive.
Oh, they're not at all.
So
Yeah,
I don't really
That's
know
true.
how to answer that. I am definitely a firm believer in empirical evidence and study and things like that, but also relate to the necessity of subjective experience in order to take in the world, and the concept of emptiness, that the world is a blank slate that we are essentially drawing upon, which is not to say that we can't intercompare ideas and draw conclusions based on that, but at the same time we ascribe value to everything that we encounter, and that we create the world as the world creates us. It's a dependent origination.
Had you, what was the woo-wooest thing you've done before this retreat?
The woo-wooest thing I've done before. Oh, wow. I don't...
Any psychic visits? Any
No.
Reiki?
No,
How many
I've always
crystals do you
been
have?
You got any crystals?
very skeptical. I did a lot of years ago. I did a lot of experimenting with LSD and mushrooms and things like that, and I read a lot of Terrence McKenna,
There you go.
and
He's my number
Timothy
one guy.
Leary and things like that. But I didn't.
gateways.
I thought it was all psychological, and I didn't ascribe it to things outside of the self and spirits and whatnot. I've always been kind of fascinated by things like that, but never really ascribed to them.
Got it.
Right.
So what got you to where you attended this retreat?
What got me there?
Yeah.
Several years ago, I was so long story, like to go back even farther than that. I'm in recovery. I'm sober, and when I got sober, I was kind of like figuring out life and things like that. And I went and visited a friend of mine in Cambodia who was living in Cambodia at the time. She was a Microsoft person who. Amazon, who was making six figures, hated her life, quit her job, decided to travel around the world for a year, ended up in Cambodia, loved it, and said, anytime you want to come out, come out. And so I said, okay, sounds good. And I went out there and I went at a meditation retreat there, and I learned how to meditate there.
Wow.
And I had a really great experience. It was really the most relaxing and kind of free I've ever felt. And I started meditating every day, and I came back to Washington, and I started looking for a kind of place to learn more. And so I started going around to different meditation centers, and I checked out the Karmapa Center down by Pike Place Market. I went to the Kadampa Center, and I started going to the Sakya Monastery in Greenwood.
Oh, okay.
Which, do you guys know that place at
No.
all?
That sounds
I don't
familiar.
know
I
this
haven't
one.
been by there, though.
It's
no.
it's a huge Tibetan monastery in the middle of Fremont. Like you go by it and you go in and there's all the artwork
working
and there's all the
everywhere.
things. It's a really interesting story. So when China invaded Tibet and they kicked out all the lamas, they kind of scattered all over the world. Well, a lot of them went to India, but the rest of them kind of scattered all over the world. And it had a Sakya lineage, which is one of the four lineages of Tibetan Buddhism, ended up in Seattle. The
Wow.
professor of Eastern philosophy at UW got him a visa to come over here, and so he came out here, and he is the next in a very long line of reincarnation of these viewed as the reincarnation of these lamas, and he
Okay.
built this monastery there.
In Fremont.
In Greenwood.
Greenwood,
Yeah. And so I went there and I started, it was just such a peaceful, wonderful place. And I went there and I started going to their weekly meditation sessions, and I started taking classes with some of the monks, and just learning more and reading more about it. And I really, really like the idea that nobody ever asked me to believe anything.
Yeah.
Nobody ever said, like, believe this or believe that dogma or believe this. It's just, yeah. And at one point I went into the monastery to take a kind of a tour of the shrine room, and I had all these questions, and I'd been reading the books, and I was just like, I'm going to poke so many holes in this philosophy, and I just need, and I was asking the monk, like, what about this? What about this? And he was just like, nah, just be compassionate. Just don't worry about any, don't worry about any of this. Don't worry about that. Like, later on, I'll tell you who that guy is or what that is, but just meditate on emptiness and be compassionate. That's all you need to do. And I was like, okay, cool. And continued meditating, and yeah, and then I was looking for another retreat like the one I had taken before, and I found this Vipassana meditation retreat, which is down in Onalaska near Chehalis. And I thought it was going to be similar to that, and it was not at all. Not at all. It was a very rewarding experience, but the one I took in Cambodia was very relaxing and very kind of, you meditated for a couple of hours a day, and then there were the classes, and you went around into the village, and this was 10 hours of meditation a day for 10 days with no talking, no eye contact, no gesturing, no communication of any kind with your fellow meditators. It's 10 full days, so you don't arrive on the 1st and leave on the 10th. You arrive one day, the next day is day 1, and then 10 full days, and you leave the day after day 10.
So no joke.
No joke. No distractions of any kind. So
literally no jokes.
No joke. Yeah. There's obviously no like television or internet or anything, but no reading. There was no
journaling.
No journaling. No writing. No artwork. On the walls. Nothing. It was completely blank. It was
flower crowns. Can you make flower crowns? Could you make anything with nature or no?
You weren't supposed to pick the flowers or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. Like, that's a way of creating something.
The only thing to do in the times between meditations was you can walk in circles around the field at the area.
And how many, in what blocks were the meditation throughout the day?
So meditation from 4:30 to 6:30 a.m.
That's a.m.,
Yeah. Okay. Then 6:30 was breakfast. Meditation from 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock, then 9 o'clock to 11 o'clock, then break for lunch. Meditation from 1 o'clock to 5 o'clock. An hour for tea. You only eat 2 meals a day. And then meditation from 6 to 7, a Dharma talk at 7, and then from whenever the Dharma talk is done until 9 o'clock, and then you go to bed at 9 o'clock.
Goodness gracious. Okay, so is it guided meditation or self-guided meditation?
Well, it couldn't be guided if there's no talking.
Well, there's
Dharma talks are
there's instruction. Right. There is instruction. So there's audio courses. It's all put together, and there's places like this all over the world. This is the Northwest Vipassana Center, put together by a guy named Wenke, who was a Burmese gentleman he's a really interesting story. He was a businessman, traveled all over the world, very successful. He started having migraines, and he went to the doctors, and nobody could cure his migraines. And someone said, you should try Vipassana. And he said, okay, fine, whatever. And he went to this place, and it changed his life. And he said, this is wonderful. I need to spread this. And so he's gone all around the world spreading and starting up these Vipassana centers. Wow. He's passed away now, but there's audio recordings of him chanting and giving instructions. Okay. And so at the nights, the Dharma talks are tapes of him, videotapes of him giving these Dharma talks. Okay. So the first day, you only observe the breath in the inside of the nostrils. Breathe in and out, and you only observe where the breath is on the inside of the nostrils.
10 hours of meditation.
10 hours. Yep. For 10 hours, you do that. Day 2, you can observe the breath coming in and out of the nostrils and the feel of the air on your the area between your nostrils and your upper lip. And that's all you're supposed to do for 10 hours. Oh my gosh. Day 3, it's the air in the nostrils. You can feel the air on the upper lip and any other sensations between your upper lip and your nostrils. And that's the first 30 hours of meditation is just doing that. And that's when you start thinking, what the hell am I doing here?
And I have 7 more days.
7 more days of this. He said on the first day that day 2 and day 6 are the hardest.
I can see that.
You will really, and you'll start thinking, I got to get out of here. This isn't good for me. Why am I doing this?
I've heard about from someone who ran away from
Did they?
Yeah.
Well,
I didn't know someone I knew that ran away on like the 6th day.
They also said if you leave early, you won't only not get the full benefit, but you might be doing damage to yourself.
Yeah.
And I thought
Interesting,
that's,
yeah.
That's kind of self-important. And now looking back, I can
Yeah.
see, oh my God, yes, that is absolutely
Yeah.
true.
Wow.
So it's those 3 days, 10 hours of meditation a day. I will admit I got up at 4:30 a few times, meditated for a while, and then fell back asleep. Not gonna lie
That's
about
just a
that.
sleep deficit
Ooh, we
body
gotcha.
thing.
Gotcha.
Yeah, got me right. And then for some of the sessions, you have to sit in the meditation hall, but other ones you can meditate in your room. And so the 3 days of that, and that's just to sharpen the mind. That's just
Clear
to
out
get
some
your
old
focus.
stuff.
It's really interesting because when I first was sitting down, I meditate every day, but my mind would constantly be wandering, as it does, and it would wander off, and they'd be like, oh yeah, I'm doing this, I'm observing the breath, and come back to the breath, and then wander off. And by the end of the third day, I could sit for a full hour and only have my mind wander off maybe 2 times,
Wow.
3
my
times.
goodness.
You
Okay,
really do
that's saying
develop,
something.
you
That's
really do get that kind of
amazing.
focus because that's all you're doing, and there's no distractions.
Nothing.
At
Yeah.
all.
That's just the thing.
And it's really one of the things, there's a lot of big realizations and things like that I kind of came to over the 10 days. But one of them is how much time I spend just distracted. Not working, or doing something that I really enjoy doing, or just relaxing, but just being distracted. Just being in this kind of not here, but not really here.
Right.
And how much, when you remove all the distractions and there's nowhere to go but in, you realize how much time you spend not doing... not actually engaged in anything or relaxing in a meaningful way.
Right.
And being.
Being.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. And with no one to, how did you find it with no one to talk through, a hard time you were having, or maybe like even a celebratory, like you had a breakthrough and was there ever a time when you really wanted to connect with another person to either ask a question or to talk with them at all?
Just see
Yeah, I'm glad I can see now the benefits of doing everything in silence because I really wanted to bitch.
Yeah.
I know
That's what I
other
was
people
thinking.
did
I'm like,
too,
And you
really,
can't even look at them like,
yeah,
you
exactly.
can't even do that.
Amanda just made a bunch of gestures,
Yeah.
like you know what I'm
Like,
talking
this
eye
about.
sucks,
rolling,
right?
like,
Like, you guys
am
too
I
with the nose
crazy?
thing
Are
and
we
with
all
the
crazy?
breathing, right?
Yeah, but I'm so glad because I don't want to take that. I don't want to take on other people's bitching, and I don't want other people to
know.
get my
Right.
bitching, and I don't want that like maybe polluting is the wrong word, but kind of
Yeah,
distorting
yeah,
absolutely.
distorting the experience or influencing other people's experience. So yes, there were times, but really I wanted to complain. I started to get really angry and started thinking like, why am I could have gone anywhere in the world. Why am I here? Why did I do this? I had 10 days off. I could have gone literally anywhere, and I went into my own brain. Why the hell did I do this? And started getting really frustrated. And on day 4, they actually teach you Vipassana. So all that is Anapana meditation, focus meditation. And Anapana, when I first heard it, I was like, this can't be it. There must be more to it than this. So you start off, and the first day when you're sitting there in your posture and you're not moving, and they say, okay, from now on you're sitting with great determination, which means you don't move at all. If your arm hurts or your leg hurts, you don't move. If you're in pain, it's too much pain, or it's absolutely unbearable, then move, because you're not supposed to completely suffer. But try to stay as focused and as still as possible. And I was having stabbing back pain.
I'm sure stuff would just come up to the surface.
Yeah.
In that.
I've ended up moving to the back of the room, and that helped a little bit because I've had back pain for a long time.
Sure.
And you sit there, and they say, okay, start with the very top of your head and feel whatever sensations just at the top of the head. And then kind of scan around your scalp and feel whatever sensations you can. Then come down your face and feel whatever sensations you can on your face, then your neck, then your shoulders. You are always feeling sensations in every part of your body. You are just not aware of them most of the time.
Wow.
Like if somebody came up, like I don't feel my shoulder. If somebody came up with their hand on their shoulder, I would be able to feel it. There's always sensation there. But most of the time, you are just completely oblivious to it.
Wow.
So you go around and you try to feel all of these sensations. And I realized, like, a lot of places, like, I could not feel my forearms at all. I was not aware of my forearms. And then after a while sitting there, you're like, oh, I can kind of feel, like, the air on it. Or, oh, I can kind of feel, like, the fabric of my shirt against my shoulder and things like that.
Yeah.
And you go from head to toe down to the bottom, and then you start, again, head to toe down to the bottom. That's all of day 4. Day 5,
so intimate.
You
with
do
your
this.
body.
You do the same thing. You start at the top, move down, and then once you get to your toes, you start at your toes and you move back up. And you just keep doing this over
Each
and
body
over and
scans.
over again.
Yeah.
And the idea behind it is that you are constantly feeling these things and we're constantly reacting to these physical sensations. When we do something or when something happens to us or when we have a thought, it corresponds with a physical sensation in our body. And we are blindly reacting to these all the time without realizing it. And that if we can have these and feel these sensations without reacting to them, then we are able to do that in the future. And we'll stop doing these blind reactions and we'll stop inadvertently hurting ourselves and others.
Wow.
They were talking a lot about sankharas. Sankharas are these blind reactions.
Okay.
And the more we do, the more we condition ourselves to do. The less we do, the less we are conditioned to do it. And if we can stop having blind reactions, then our previous blind reactions will slowly start to dissipate and disappear. And they described it as the difference between taking a line and writing a line in water, and it will just disappear immediately. Writing a line in sand, which will stay there for a while, but then the tide will come up and wash it away. And carving a line in stone, and it will stay there. And we've been carving these lines of blind reactions in our stones, that we're just reacting to things, we're reacting to things, but we're not aware of what we're doing. We're not feeling these things within ourselves. These experiences that we're having are corresponding with physical sensations, and we're reacting blindly to these physical sensations, and we're reacting to craving and aversion, and everything comes back to craving and aversion. You're craving good sensations, and you're trying to avoid bad sensations.
Ooh, that's so true.
So when you're scanning yourself for any kinds of sensations, to try to approach them with equanimity. Like I have a pain in my leg that is exactly the same, that is exactly equal to this slight tingling I'm feeling in my left forearm. To try to approach that with the same, and to not react.
Yep.
And all this physical stuff starts happening. All this, you start feeling physical pain, and all of these like psychological, like all of the things that have happened to you, and all the things that you've done start coming up. Yeah, and you're just going up and down and up and down and up and down. And then it's just more details of that for the next 5 days, where you sit there for 5 days.
Where you're just viewing your insides and your thought patterns and your sensations in your body and your consciousness in your body.
Not even necessarily with thought patterns, just the physical sensations. Just the physical sensations. Just the physical sensations.
God, that would ground you
Was
so
that
much in your
difficult
body.
for you to, or like how long did it take you before you noticed kind of an improvement between attaching a thought to the sensation and just it, like you said, with equanimity of it's just another sensation?
It's still something that I'm forcing to do, to try to approach it as like, oh, that pain in my leg is the same as, it's trying to view the things as equal, even because I'm so used to treating them as not equal.
Right.
So I don't know if it's I think it's a much longer process. And they're saying this is
to be cultivated.
Yeah,
That's
this is the first step in a very long.
Right.
And I should also note, we're recording this on a Tuesday. I got home from this on Sunday. Like this is
fresh.
very fresh.
He's fresh.
Very fresh in my mind.
You're not all better, is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm saying this is all real fresh in my mind, and this is
I'm amazed that you're able
48
to
hours out.
talk this, like this much about it. 'Cause it seems like this is just from other people I've seen who've come back. They said that, like, and you can answer this question too. When you first came back, was the sights and the sounds and the questions and information, and did you notice that so much more of just how much input there is all the time?
It was somewhat overwhelming.
Sure.
I got out of the center. And I drove back up, and I gave a ride there's a ride share program thing. So I had to give a ride to somebody that that didn't have a car, and I drove them back up, and we talked, the whole time. And then I got home, and I was like, oh, I don't have any food, because I didn't want to have anything in my fridge to go bad. So, I'll just go up the street to brunch. And I went to brunch on a Sunday, and it was so loud and crazy.
Wow.
It was just like, what am I doing?
That's the craziest time at a restaurant.
It was
brunch specific.
Sunday brunch.
Sunday brunch.
Sunday
Drunken
brunch.
brunch.
So I realized that, like, oh, this is very overwhelming right now. I thought it was going to be like a quiet sit at the counter and have some pancakes kind of thing. But yeah, it's been
Can't
a little bit.
you guys just notice the pancakes and not talk about the pancakes?
Yeah.
God. So what was some of your, I know it's only been a few days, but if you kind of, what you felt that you came away with, then maybe that something was unexpected, or either a feeling or a thought or a sensation that you came away with.
The things that I'm experiencing right now is a lot of really noticing when I experience something, what that physically feels like inside. So in the past couple of days, I've talked with many people, and I've had people say things that I found kind of annoying, and I get annoyed, and I'm like, oh, that's okay, there's a little bit of tension there, there's a little bit of tension there. That's what being annoyed feels like, or angry, and these physical things that have always been happening, but that I never noticed and I never ascribed anything to. The stuff together made me kind of sad, and then that's inside. That's what that physically feels like. The physical sensation of sadness. Okay, a little thing there and a bit there. Feeling tense and noticing the knots. I was able to use a roller to roll out the knots in my back that had been causing me all that back pain. So a lot of that was working through at the retreat, and then now I don't have any back pain at all, which is really nice. Well, I mean, I rolled them out beforehand, and so they were healing down from that while I was at the retreat. I don't necessarily think that the retreat healed my back pain.
Okay, well,
maybe it did. I don't know.
The combination, that's what's beautiful. Little science, little woo.
But definitely that tense, the tension, like, this happens and it's tense, and I can feel the tension in the exact spots where the knots were. And I'm like, that's what that was.
Yeah.
That's exactly what that was.
Like you said, over time and years and years and years.
Yeah, and being stressed out or but feeling these physical sensations and feeling them come up and just, I feel a great deal of loving compassion right now to pretty much everybody I encounter. And I don't know if that's going to fade. And I think a lot of the questions with things like this is how often, what are the long term and if I continue doing the work. Because it's always been my experience that life-changing experiences very rarely change lives. That we have these life-changing things, and then 2 weeks later, you're kind of back in your back to your old self, and that's not true for everybody in every way.
Integration is
So it was a very profound experience, and very it lasted much longer than I thought it was going to. Because people saying, you can do anything for 10 days, but can you do nothing for 10 days?
Can you do nothing for 10 days?
And I had horrible allergies, and the only thing to do was walk around these waist-high fields of grass. It's just like sneezing and and not communicating. And on the last day, day 10, after the morning session, they were like, okay, we're gonna have a day of talking. You'll be able to talk to people in order to kind of reintegrate yourself. And walking out of the meditation hall that morning and hearing the two people behind me, one guy turned to the other and said, "So hi, I guess." And starting to talk to these people, and it immediately all came out, and everything that had been happening and everything, and I just felt so elated and so so much lighter and freer and it's been very it was very interesting to talk with all these people, and especially it was very strange that we hadn't communicated at all.
Even
with LSD and with mushrooms and 2CB and San Pedro and whatever else were very because they were big experiences, and they were significant, and they felt like they had some meaning, but I never had that. I always felt very, very separate. I always felt very fragmented. I know that's different than a lot of people express, and it would make me feel very afraid, and I felt very alone. But I wanted people to think that I was having the experience that everyone else was having, kind of a thing. So I never had that. I never had that feeling of oneness. I had much more feelings of fear and anxiety, and all of my anxieties multiplied. And my brain started just going. Yeah.
Would you ever do them again, you think?
No, I don't think so.
What was your set and setting?
Set and setting?
I always like to ask that.
Well, it seemed like it was a bunch of different times, right?
Several different times, yeah.
Okay.
Raves, which was a really bad place for me. In general, I'm not a loud music. I'm more of a quiet night with three friends kind of person than a rave kind of person. Or just, being out in the woods or in the city or Burning Man, different kinds of stuff like that.
Gosh, the energy of raves, just how many people are there and how many different substances they're on, and trying to deal with that, it's no wonder that you had crazy anxiety. That would give me so much anxiety even just thinking about.
And looking back, when you're growing up and you don't really know who you are and you're experimenting with different identities and things like that, and trying to be like, oh, I bet I'm this person. I bet I'm the kind of person. And I remember how freeing it was realizing, oh, screw that. I am not that guy. I don't have any desire to go out to a club and get dressed up and go and dance with a bunch of other people that are all dressed up and I don't want to do that. I want to hang out and
and you're like, and I don't have to.
I want to do bits. I want to hang out with friends and I want to do bits.
My mom would say.
Yeah.
Me and my friend recently I was down in Portland. One of our really great friends lives there, and we were hanging out for 2 days, like a Friday and Saturday night before I was going to a graduation in Eugene. And both nights we still had that kind of leftover thing of like, it's Friday night, like, should we go to the thing? Like, we have to go to the bar, and we're like, no, let's just sit on the porch and talk. We're like, okay.
We get up against that all the time.
And then the next night we're like, so it's Saturday, should we do? And then we're like, no, maybe we'll smoke a little weed and sit on the porch again. Yep, okay, let's do that. That's like all we wanted to do.
So much better. Just sit around, talk, and laugh.
People that you love. That's what you do at a bar anyways. Then you have to
Yeah.
pay for it, and you're drinking all night. And then everyone, like, their drunk personalities come out, and you end up all going home hating each other.
Yeah.
It's really a blast.
It's a blast.
Bars, they're great, guys.
Oh, man. This has been awesome.
Yeah.
This has been great.
Yeah, totally.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah.
This is also really great because, like I said, I just got back and I haven't really unpacked this yet.
Yes.
I haven't, so it's been very nice to talk about it and just kind of like talk
Yeah.
about it with you two. This is
Yeah.
great.
That's a really great lesson. I mean, even just thank you for sharing that about just noticing in our body when, especially for me, like there's certain times when I'm very aware of what I'm feeling, and then there's other times when I am just very unaware, and then I get frustrated, and then I get anxious because I'm unaware of like why I'm angry or why I'm, and like you said, like I just start reacting in either like aversion or like I just need to like, with me it's like, oh, maybe I need to like eat something, or go, oh, I should probably go hang out with someone. Like it's this immediate need to like fix it.
Yeah.
Or like aversion, like I don't want to think about that, or like I'm craving
everything
something
but
else.
be with it.
Yeah, just
Everything
observing it,
but
just sitting
be
in
with
it,
it.
and
Yeah.
that it's that middle ground between blindly reacting and suppressing.
Yeah.
Just being there and having that as an option.
Yeah. I always say it's like
fully
looking at it
experiencing.
on like a petri dish. Like, this is
yeah.
anger in your body. And
Yeah.
just inspecting it. Yeah.
It's awesome.
Cool. Thanks, Chris.
Any last
Oh, yeah, we'll
words?
put your information about your tours and your podcast all on our website so people
Great.
can find it.
Yeah.
And anything else you want to share so people
For
can hunt
sure.
you down.
The SeattleFiles.com is the
Yeah.
website.
Yeah.
So check
Perfect.
it out, or it's on
Awesome.
iTunes, Stitcher, Google
It's
Play,
great.
all of
It's
those.
hilarious.
Woo! We gotta get ours all connected on everything like
Yeah.
that. If you guys don't know how to spell files, it's FILES.
Yes, it's one of those, not the
Seattle.
PH. Yeah.
Files. Oh, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks again.
Thank you.
Bye, guys. Thanks for joining us.